This video is a continuation of the preceding. We've seen that AWP, On Ancient Medicine, and On the Sacred Disease are anonymous. Why do we say they were written by Hippocrates? Because, in part, we have two primary manuscripts containing about 60 medical works that, though all anonymous, their scribes tell us are the writings of Hippocrates. What is the Hippocratic Corpus? One answer to that question is that it is the treatises in these two manuscripts, V and M, the 12th century Vaticanus Graecus number 276, which we saw was the primary extant Greek manuscript for AWP, and the 10th century Martianus Graecus number 269 at the St. Mark's Library in Venice, which is the primary manuscript for On Ancient Medicine. However, in the works they include, and in the order they are presented, these two manuscripts are inconsistent with each other, and furthermore, V has an index of its contents that is not consistent with its actual contents. So the waters are muddied. Furthermore, scholars for centuries have been unanimous that the quantity and diversity of subject matter, motivation, language, and style among these works is such that it is not possible they could all have been written by the same one individual. Which prompts the question, how far back does such an aggregation as found in V and M go? All the way back to antiquity? It seems so. All the way back to Hippocrates? Likely not. In any case, our first important surviving piece of evidence is the 1st century glossator Erosion. By the way, if you're going to do any serious mucking around in the Hippocratic Corpus, a very handy reference work to have at hand is Elizabeth Craik's 2015 catalog, in which she summarizes the content, comments on the substance and style, and spells out the broader context of each of the 60 or so works that have been passed down in the manuscript tradition as constituting the corpus. Notice, by the way, in her title she puts Hippocratic in quotes. One reason such a reference work is handy is that the conventional title for many of the treatises is misleading as to their true contents. In the 1st century CE, then, at the time of Nero, a certain Greek named Erosion, probably living in Rome, compiled a still extant glossary of rare words in the writings of Hippocrates, Erotianou ton par Hippocrate lexeon synagogae, Erotiani vocum Hippocraticarum collectio. Erosion's preface reveals that by then it was already being debated which medical works still in circulation were actually written by Hippocrates. Erosion weighs in and tells us which ones he considers genuine, and so his glossary is our first extant index of Hippocrates' writings. But as he says in his preface, Erosion was drawing on others, frequently citing, for example, Bacchius of Tanagra, who in turn was a follower of Herophilus, a famous physician who is said to be the father of anatomy and the first Greek physician to dissect the human cadaver. Herophilus and Bacchius were associated with the famous Ptolemaic Library of Alexandria, and modern scholars believe it was these early scholars from the Hellenistic era that formulated the Hippocratic question just as they did the Homeric question. Erosion's index is also interesting for a secondary reason. Whichever set of treatises one deems to be genuine Hippocrates, how should they be ordered? One obvious choice is by subject matter, and in Craik's words, it would be hard to improve on Erosion's pioneering subject matter arrangement. His first category is ta semiotica, semiotic works, works on signs, that is, basically symptoms. So, for example, the prognostic. His next category is works on etiology and nature, ta aetiologica kai physica, such as On the Nature of Man, AWP, and On the Sacred Disease. These first two categories, Craik says, comprise an overarching approach to the basic theories of medical practice. And from theory, erosion moves on to the practice itself, ta therapeutica. And these he subdivides into surgical works, ta ton eis chirurgian anekonton, works like on fractures and joints. I'm especially anxious to read the one on hemorrhoids and fistulas. And into works on regime, ta eis diaiton. Fourthly, a couple works of mixed character, including a very readable collection of medical aphorisms that aren't a bad introduction to ancient medicine. And lastly, works on the techne of medicine, ta ton es ton peri technes tenonton logon, including on ancient medicine. This is the first surviving mention of on ancient medicine in antiquity, and as you can see, it was a work which, as far as erosion was concerned, was written by Hippocrates. So besides the manuscript tradition, another answer to the question, what is the Hippocratic corpus, is the works included by erosion, which we may regard as a refinement to an Alexandrian catalogue. Hoi antipepontasin hoi poloiton athleton epithymuntas men olympionicae genestai medenda praten hos tututuken epitedeontes. The kind of thing the majority of athletes have experienced, wishing on the one hand to become Olympic champions, taking no steps on the other hand to reach this goal, toi utonti kai tois poloiston iatron sumbebeken. Such a thing has happened to the majority of doctors. Epainusi mengar Hippocraten kai proton hapanton heguntai, for they praise Hippocrates on the one hand and consider him to be without peer, genestai de autus en homoios ekenoi panta malon etuto pratusin, but for themselves to become in the same rank as him, they do everything rather than this. So wrote the physician Galen in the century following erosion in the opening words of his work Hoti Aristos Iatros kai Philosophos, quod optimus sit medicus quoque philosophus, that the best physician is also a philosopher. Hippocrates was Galen's medical philosopher role model, and it makes you wonder what Galen's opinion of the treatise on ancient medicine was, with its attempt to separate philosophy and medicine. We'll come back to that. Galen wrote prolifically on medical topics, but on the history, philosophy, and theory of medicine as well. In fact, measured by the number of extant words written, Galen is said to be the most prolific author we have from antiquity. So in perusing his voluminous output, we might expect to find solid evidence for what constituted the Hippocratic corpus in his opinion. And up to a point, our expectations are met. As a physician and as a medical theoretician and polemicist, Galen was invested as much, if not more, than Erosion and the Alexandrians in determining which of the many medical works still in circulation in Galen's time were genuine Hippocrates. In fact, he wrote a work called On the Authentic and Spurious Works of Hippocrates, but unfortunately it is lost. However, he did write extensively about Hippocrates, for example, a glossary of words in Hippocrates, a work comparing the doctrines of Hippocrates and Plato, a work on the elements in Hippocrates, by my count some 15 commentaries on individual works of Hippocrates, and numerous citations across his many writings. We have a good idea which works he considered genuine then. Equally importantly, for coming to our own conclusions, we know Galen's criteria for genuineness, based on his very particular view of what constituted Hippocratic medicine. So, did Galen think Hippocrates wrote on ancient medicine? He only cites the work once, and not favorably. The citation is in his commentary on Hippocrates' Epidemics 2, which commentary has only survived in an Arabic translation. The Corpus Medicorum Graecorum, or CMG, has a German translation of the Arabic. The CMG, by the way, is a valuable resource for ancient medicine. Its website is hosted by the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Sciences. You can follow the menu links to see a list of their publications, some of which are free online. Many of these publications were or are the definitive editions of particular ancient texts, and they are often published with translations and commentaries in German or English or French or Italian. At the time I took this screenshot, for example, you can see they had just published a critical edition of Galen's Glossary of Hippocratic Terms with translation and commentary in Italian. Galen's solicitation of On Ancient Medicine comes in his Arabic surviving exegesis of this entry from Epidemics 2. Reteon hoti haimatos hruentos ek kloiuntai kai hosa ala toi auta hoti prosto hugrainen kai xerainen kai thermainen kai psyken pola antis toi auta epoi. Now the translation of this in the Loeb is, one must say that in hemorrhage patients develop a greenish color, and one can find many other such things related to wetness and dryness, to hotness and cold, but don't worry about what it means. What Galen says Hippocrates wanted to say here is that this coloration in the hemorrhaging patient is another proof of the primacy of the four elements moist and dry, hot and cold, in the causation and treatment of disease. These primary four elements were a key component of Galen's own medical theory, and he believed he had a precedent for this in Hippocrates. Never mind, Galen says in his exegesis, those who think these words in Epidemics 2 actually confirm words to the opposite effect regarding these four elements in the medical work titled On the Ancient Medicine. All you have to do to see that I'm right, Galen says, is read Hippocrates On the Nature of Man, aphorisms, and the other genuine writings, den anderen echten Schriften, in the German translation of the Arabic. When Galen refers to words to the opposite effect in On Ancient Medicine, he has passages like these in mind. The speaker in On Ancient Medicine says he is at a loss to understand how his opponents, those who insist medicine needs a foundational hypothesis like hot or cold, wet or dry, can possibly treat people in accordance with their hypothesis. Ugarestin autois oimai ex euremenon autoti ep heoitu thermon epsikron exeron ehugron medeni aloi ede koinoneon. For they have not, I think, discovered anything that is in itself purely hot or cold or dry or wet and shares in no other kind. And a little later, psychroteta de egoga kai thermoteta passeon hekista ton dynamion nomisto dynasteoen in toi somati diatastetas propasias. I consider that of all the powers, cold and heat exercise the least power in the body for the following reasons. For what Hippocrates believed, read, Galen says, On the Nature of Man. The author of this work, again, Galen believes it is Hippocrates, says man is a composite of these four elements, and a la earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, returns to them upon death. Ananke toinun, tes pusios toi autes hyparcuses, kai ton alon hapanton, kai tes tu anthropu, me hen enai ton anthropon, al hekaston ton symbalomenon esten genesin, ek en ten dunamin in toi somati hoien per sun ebalato. Therefore, since such is the nature both of all other things and of man, man of necessity is not one, but each of the components contributing to generation, referring to the four elements, has in the body the power it contributed. Kai palinge ananke anakorein esten heoitu pusin hekaston teleutontos tu somatos tu anthropu, to te hugron pros tu hugron kai taloi pa. Again, each component must return to its own nature when the body of a man dies, moist to moist, etc. Or Galen says, read aphorisms. See this aphorism kicking off section 3 of the Book of Aphorisms. Hametabolai ton horeon malista tictusi nosemata, kai entesin horesin haimegalai met alagai e psyxios etapsios kai tala katalogon hutos. It is chiefly the changes of the seasons which produce diseases, and in the seasons the great changes from cold or heat, and so on according to the same rule. So a third answer to the question, what is the Hippocratic corpus, could be the theoretically reconstructible list of genuine writings of Hippocrates as determined by Galen. Unlike erosion, this list evidently would not contain On Ancient Medicine. Now, as you know, that work has come down to us in the Marcianus Graecus as belonging to Hippocrates, but Galen's overpowering influence on the following centuries may have had its effect, because On Ancient Medicine was never translated into Arabic or Latin. If we fast forward past the Middle Ages to the Renaissance and beyond, we find one modern scholar who didn't agree with Galen, and this was the 19th century Parisian Émile Littré. The current Wikipedia article on Littré says he is best known for his dictionary of the French language, known simply as Le Littré. But to classicists and medical historians, this man of prodigious output is best known for his monumental edition of the complete works of Hippocrates, issued in 10 volumes over the course of more than 20 years. Littré was a top-notch philologist who had also studied medicine and who stopped just short of completing his doctorate and starting a career in medicine in order to care for his recently widowed mother. Why do we call his edition monumental? First of all, his Hippocrates was based on a fresh collation of the manuscripts and was published with a thorough critical apparatus. And for this reason, it entirely replaced the Vulgate Greek text established by the first print edition of the complete Hippocrates from the Aldus Manutius Press in Venice in 1526, no less of a monumental achievement. Littré's edition also had a French translation and extensive medical and philological commentary, drawing on Littré's twofold expertise. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, his first published volume, in 1839, had a 500-page introduction that exhaustively examined the Hippocratic question and launched the modern era of Hippocratic scholarship. For some works in the collection, Littré's edition is still the standard source. Others now have a more modern edition, but it is still the universal practice when citing Hippocratic writings to include the volume and page number in Littré. Based on 4 criteria of his devising, Littré divided the writings in the manuscripts into 11 classes, the first being those writings he regarded as written by Hippocrates himself, véritablement d'Hippocrate. The second, works written by Polybus, Hippocrates' pupil and son-in-law. This included especially On the Nature of Man, which Littré, contra Galen, attributed to Polybus based on a passage in Aristotle. The third class is writings anterior to Hippocrates. The fourth, works for which we don't have sufficient ancient witnesses for attribution to Hippocrates himself, but which in Littré's estimation clearly at least belong to disciples from the putative Hippocratic medical school of Kos. One such work, Littré believed, was On the Sacred Disease. How did On Ancient Medicine fare in Littré's representation of the Hippocratic corpus? Numero uno. Not only did Littré count On Ancient Medicine as a genuine work of Hippocrates, but he gave it pride of place as the first work published in his edition. Notice, by the way, that Airs, Waters, Places is second. What convinced Littré that Hippocrates himself wrote on ancient medicine? At a certain point in Plato's dialogue Phaedrus, Socrates, speaking of Pericles, asserts to Phaedrus that the method of the art of healing, he techne iatrike, is much the same as that of rhetoric, he techne rhetorike. In both cases, there is a nature we have to determine, of the body in the case of medicine, of the soul in the case of rhetoric. Now, do you think it is possible to understand the nature of the soul satisfactorily without the nature of the whole? Socrates asks. Psyches un pusin axios logu katanoesai oie dunaton enai aneutes tu holu pusaos? If we are to believe Hippocrates the Asclepiad, Phaedrus replies, we can't understand even the body without such a procedure. Emen Hippocrate get toi Asclepiadon de tipitestai, ude perisomatos aneutes methodu tautes. Kaloscar o hetaire lege, cre mentoi prostoi Hippocrate ton logon exetasdontas scopen e sympone. He is right, my friend. However, we must not just rely on the authority of Hippocrates. We must examine his assertion and see if it accords with the truth. Agreed, says Phaedrus. Totoinun peripusaos scope typota lege Hippocrates te kaiho aletes logos. Then see what Hippocrates and true reason say about nature. Ar uk hode de dianoestai peri hotu un pusaos proton men? Must we not then reflect about any nature whatsoever as follows first, and etc.? This is one of several passages in the dialogues that reveal Plato's admiration for his near contemporary Hippocrates the Asclepiad, as he is called here. Now, which Hippocratic writing was Phaedrus referring to? On the nature of man, according to Galen; on ancient medicine, and especially chapter 20, according to Littré, for reasons he spells out. And once Littré convinced himself of that, he was obliged, he says, to go with the witness closest in time, namely Plato, and regard on ancient medicine as being written by Hippocrates. In this work of Hippocrates, Littré says, has it all. It contains at the same time a polemic, a method, and a system, and for this reason he gives it pride of place. So yet another answer to the question, what is the Hippocratic corpus, could be the works in the manuscripts as classified by Littré. Hippocrates, Hippocratic medicine, Hippocratic corpus. These are elusive concepts. We have seen that Erosion, Galen, and Littré are fundamental to the question which works constitute the corpus and which of those are quote-unquote genuine. But thinking more radically, is the corpus really just a Hellenistic, an imperial, or a Renaissance construct that gives a bunch of anonymous and quite disparate medical texts that happen to be written in the Ionic dialect, the imprimatur Hippocrates, or Hippocratic? Considered collectively, do these works have an identifiable and unifying characteristic or characteristics that deserve the designation corpus? That's food for thought. But now let's return to On the Sacred Disease.